Hey everybody, it's your old comic book pal Chuck Dixon here for the first episode of what I'm calling Drive Time. So many of you have said that you listen to this at work, you listen to me at work, you listen to Ask Chuck Dixon at work, or while you're commuting or whatever, and for whatever reason, me rattling on various obscure subjects makes the time go faster for you. So, makes you feel less alone in your life. So I'm going to do some audio only episodes that aren't Ask Chuck Dixon. Don't worry, your question will not get fobbed off on an audio only episode. But I'm going to like talk about different subjects that you know come to mind, not necessarily prompted by your questions, or maybe I'll answer some questions that none of you knew to ask. So generally, I'm going to take a topic or whatever. I don't know. I'm formatting this as I go along. As you can tell, I'm really winging this. But if you want to listen, I'll talk to you. I feel like I owe you, you merry few who listen to me each week, owe you something a little extra. So we'll see how this goes over. See how you like it. Please let me know in the comments. So this episode is about Zoom calls. Oh, don't run away. I've got some interesting Zoom call stories. So we're going to talk about Zoom calls a little bit. Um, so um, probably all of you have been on a Zoom call with relatives or perhaps for business or whatever, but I do a lot of Zoom calls. And there's two kinds of Zoom calls. There's the kinds that are interesting and productive, and there's the kind that are excruciatingly boring. Uh, because some people really love meetings. I don't particularly like meetings, but some people just love meetings for their own sake. I've actually been on a Zoom call where I called an end to it because most of the Zoom call was discussing the next meeting. I was like, okay, I'm out of here. Now, if you've been on a Zoom call with me, you're probably on the edge of your seat thinking, Chuck, where do I fall? Am I excruciatingly boring or interesting and informative? Well, I got to say right off the bat, because I know Jean-Francois Cavalier, the Baron, is listening. And I got to say, Jean-Francois, mon ami, you always put together an awesome Zoom call. If you're leading the Zoom call, it's fun, it's informative, it's actually productive. I've talked in the past about production meetings with movie people, and they're okay in person because there's a little bit of an exchange, uh, and sometimes you're in the room with a famous person, which kind of makes it cool. But production meetings by Zoom are awful generally, because generally you've got a money guy, a producer type, and they want to tell you all about how wonderful they are, and then and nobody else gets to talk, and you're basically afraid to put any ideas forth, um, and it's just dull and unproductive, and generally I get thrown off of them. I used to get thrown off of conference calls all the time because I would say unpopular things like "That's the dumbest idea I've ever heard." Uh, but Jean-Francois, I've been in a number of production meeting calls, Zoom calls with him, and Jean-Francois is he's a mover and a shaker, not a Hollywood guy, as you can probably tell. He's a Frenchman, and he has an international reach in the film world through distribution, production, all the rest of it. A tremendously talented man, and lots of connections. And I would have Zoom calls with him, and all, most times production Zoom calls don't go anywhere, nothing ever gets made or whatever. But his are always entertaining and wildly informative. I mean, he's introduced me to people that just simply blew my mind with just the info dumps, the information they dropped on me about the film world and the rest of it. And actually, Jean-Francois and I are involved in putting together a film project, and we're dealing with a screenwriter, and we're dealing with another producer. And every single one, we've had numerous production Zoom call meetings, and every single one of them has been productive. We've actually moved the needle forward. There's no egos involved. And everyone on the Zoom call knows film. They know story. So I'm sitting there thinking I'm with people of a like mind as myself. I just care about the content. That's all they care about. And there are suggestions, because I mean producers always want to make suggestions, but usually they're the suggestions that a 5-year-old child might make. But in this room, in this Zoom call, it's always, I don't know, inspiring. They understand story, and there's real discussion about story amongst people who understand story, from the producers to the screenwriter to everybody else. And it's always a good room. So Jean-Francois, you're off the hook, man. You are not one of the boring guys. So now another guy who really impressed me on Zoom calls, Graham Nolan and I were involved in a business venture with tech people and film people. Jean-Francois was involved in it as well. And one of the guys that was one of the movers and shakers in that organization was a guy named Jeff Pierce. And Jeff is like he's just a techno nabob, man. He is just like he's just ahead of the curve everywhere on entertainment technology and AI and blockchain, all of that stuff. And when I first met Jeff in these Zoom calls, he would just do this, data dump and just start talking. And I would understand about 10% of what he was saying. But what was amazing is that even though I didn't really understand what he was talking about half the time, just this blizzard of acronyms I didn't know the meaning of, he was still really engaging. I'm like hanging on his every word. And it's not because he's like a Tony Robbins, real dynamic personality. I think Jeff would admit he's a pretty laid back guy. But his depth of authority on the subject of all things technical made me thought, damn, this guy knows what he's talking about. I should really listen really, really hard. I might learn something. I always did learn something from Jeff. He was always engaging. And eventually I learned, I could understand about 75% of what he was saying. I still don't understand all of it. But there was a really epic Zoom call that I had. And, nobody's ever said that before. I had an epic Zoom call where we were all supposed to meet. And it was like another round of COVID, and everybody was sick. And so the only two people that made it to the meeting were me and Jeff. So there was really nothing we could do. We didn't have a quorum. Our other partners weren't there. And so Jeff and I just talked. Mostly I listened, and Jeff talked. And Jeff told me, he had me on the phone for like an hour and a half. And he told me all this stuff about the entertainment industry. He was a big visual effects guy. If you watched a big action movie in the 90s, early 2000s, that was memorable, Jeff was the lead visual effects guy on it. Cliffhanger, the American Godzilla movie. I know nobody likes the American Godzilla movie, but the effects were pretty cool. So he worked on all these, big budget A picture doing visual effects. And he told me a lot about that, a lot of the inside about that, the personalities and the rest of it. And then a lot of where the technology was going, where visual technology was going, and why we were seeing varying degrees of CGI quality, even in big budget movies. And he was explaining, why that happens and what that work environment was like. So that was an incredible Zoom call, even though it was only the two of us. So that was a good one. Another thing about these Zoom calls with this thing we were trying to put together was it was me and Graham. We're the two comic book guys, and everybody else is talking finances and distribution and tech and all kinds of stuff like that we really weren't. Crypto. I mean, Graham and I are like, yeah, okay, we're comic book guys. When do we start talking about comic books? So Graham and I would amuse one another by sending messages to one another on Facebook, DMing on Facebook while we were in the meeting. And after a while, it became a competition to see who could crack who up. And we didn't really keep it much of a secret because they can see you on the Zoom call. And so people would go, "What's so funny, Chuck?" It's like, and I couldn't tell them what Graham had just sent me because we were doing running commentary on the meeting. So that was fun. But so I mean that's the world of Zoom calls. But there's a few other people I know might be listening who are like, "Am I one of the boring Zoom calls?" I had a Zoom call recently with the RIPA crew, the creative crew, and it was Eric and NDA Andrew, and Carol Brown, and Mike Barron, and the Saska sisters, and that was fun. That's always fun. We've had a few of these, but this one we really got into it because it was basically a writer's Zoom call, and with Andrew and Caro now entering the arena as writers, they were involved. And it was really good because we were presenting, basically each person presented where they wanted to go with their particular properties. Mike Barron presented this new series he's going to be doing and what his expectations were for it. The Saskas were talking about where they're taking Yaira and Bloodruth and the characters that they concentrate on. And Eric explained where he was going with Isom and Norfolka, which is another series which RIPA fans are just dying to see. And then my contribution was basically to explain that my job was to keep Joe Bennett busy. And he was keeping me busy, keeping him busy, because Joe is an amazingly fast artist. But the thrust of it was to share with each other where we were going to take it, to make sure we're all on the same page and we're not violating each other's continuity. And that was a cool meeting, and we all get along well, and we play well and play nice with each other, and it was nice. There was an energy there. Of course, whenever the Saska sisters show up, it's energy. I mean, I got to take a Red Bull, I got to drink a Red Bull before I get on the air with them, and I got to take a nap afterwards because they're just. It's like a fire hose of information coming out of them on what their story's about and where they're going and everything else. And they're so hyped up and they're so excited about everybody else's work, which is cool. They really, I'd say they lift the energy level of the room. No, they make the energy level of the room. They set the tone for every meeting. And it's really cool because those gals, they are enthusiasm plus. And it's a lot of fun to work with them. And so, those are good Zoom calls. I won't talk about bad Zoom calls because I don't like to talk bad about anybody, but there's been some really awful ones. I've been on some bad ones. And like I said, I'll generally get kicked off or they end early or nothing goes well and nothing comes of it. But, I kind of dread being on them because you never know how it's going to go. But if it's Ripa or if it's the Baron, I'm cool with it. Okay, so that's it. This is not a particularly long episode. I'm gonna have to find more to talk about, but it's a start. It's a start. I promise Drive Time will be more of a stream of consciousness thing in the future, and I'll come up with some good topics. Maybe you folks could suggest some topics that I could dive deeper on. A number of you have said that they've appreciated my answer to questions in the past, but they would like to have more in-depth answers on those subjects. So maybe there's a few of them you folks could suggest. This is for you. I'm doing it for you. This isn't monetized, as you've noticed. There's no one talking about erectile dysfunction or solar charged generators. It's just me telling you crap that I think you might be interested in. So anyway, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you watched, you didn't see a whole lot. And I will see all of you down the road.